Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I never imagined I would be telling this story even now as I sit here reflecting on that night. I find myself caught between disbelief and a strange, lingering warmth. Life has a way of surprising us, throwing moments at us that force us to reconsider everything we thought we understood. It all began with a house party. Nothing extravagant, just a small gathering of close friends. My husband, Mark, had been planning it for weeks, eager to reconnect with his old college buddies. We were hosting it at our home, a cozy yet spacious house just outside of town. I spent the entire afternoon preparing, making sure the house was spotless and the food was just right. At 53, I had hosted my fair share of parties, but there was something about this one that made me feel restless. By the time the guests started arriving, the house was filled with the warm hum of conversation and laughter. I moved through the crowd effortlessly, exchanging hugs, refilling drinks, and ensuring everyone felt welcome. Mark was in his element, standing by the bar, deep in conversation with his friends about the good old days. And that's when I saw him. David. David had been Mark's best friend from college, though we hadn't seen much of him in recent years. He was the kind of man who exuded effortless charm, his presence commanding without needing to try. At 55, he had the kind of confidence that only comes with experience. And though he wasn't conventionally handsome, there was something about him, maybe the way he listened intently when you spoke, or the way his smile reached his eyes, that made him intriguing. We hadn't spoken much over the years, just polite exchanges at occasional gatherings, but that night felt different. Maybe it was the wine, or perhaps it was the way he looked at me, really looked at me, as though he was seeing me for the first time. "You've done an amazing job with this place," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "It feels so lived in, like a home." I laughed, brushing off the compliment. "Well, after 25 years of marriage, you tend to accumulate a lot of memories in one place." His gaze lingered on me for a moment, his expression unreadable, yet he added, "But you look like someone who still has so many more memories to make." His words caught me off guard. There was something in the way he said it, not flirtatious, not suggestive, just thoughtful, that made me wonder how often I had been seen as just Mark's wife, rather than as my own person. As the night went on, I found myself drawn to him in a way I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't about attraction, at least not in the way people would assume. It was something deeper, something that felt like recognition. At one point, I stepped outside for some fresh air. The backyard was quiet, the cool night breeze, a welcome contrast to the warmth inside. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to breathe for a moment, and then, "I was hoping I'd find you out here." David's voice broke through the silence. I turned, startled, but not entirely surprised. He leaned against the railing, looking at me with that same unreadable expression. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said. "You just seemed like you needed a moment." I smiled softly. I guess I did, for a while. We stood there in comfortable silence, the distant laughter from inside drifting through the night air. Then he spoke again. "You know, I've always admired you, even from a distance," he admitted. "The way you carry yourself, the way you make people feel at ease. You have a presence. Claire, I don't think you even realize it. I swallowed, unsure of how to respond. Compliments like that weren't something I was used to, at least not in such a genuine way. Mark is lucky, he continued, but I wonder, do you ever feel like you're more than just someone's wife? His question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths, and in that moment, I realized that I didn't have an answer. I let his question linger in the cool night air, unsure how to respond. Was I more than just someone's wife? Of course I was. I had my own thoughts, my own dreams, my own regrets, but somewhere along the way, I had allowed my identity to blur into Mark's. It wasn't something I resented. It was just something I hadn't really thought about until now. David's eyes held mine, patient yet searching, as if he wasn't expecting an answer, but was waiting to see if I'd ask myself the question. I don't think I've ever really stopped to consider that, I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. A small, knowing smile crossed his lips. That's what I figured. A comfortable silence settled between us. Again, the sounds of the party muffled behind the glass doors. I could still hear Mark laughing with his friends, the clinking of glasses, the music playing softly in the background. It was a scene I had witnessed countless times. Yet standing there with David, I felt a strange distance from it all, like an observer rather than a participant. David exhaled, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. You know, Claire, I've always wondered what kind of woman would end up with Mark. He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. And when I met you, I understood instantly. You ground him. You balance him. But I also wondered if anyone ever stops to ask, who balances you? I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth was, I didn't know. Before I could find the words, the patio door slid open, and Mark stepped outside, his face flushed with laughter and whiskey. You two, I was wondering where you disappeared to, he said, clapping David on the shoulder. Are you giving my wife some old college wisdom? David chuckled, his demeanor shifting effortlessly back to something lighthearted. Something like that. Mark grinned, oblivious to the undercurrent of the conversation he had interrupted. Well, come on back in. We're about to open another bottle. David's eyes flicked back to mine for just a second, long enough for me to catch something unreadable in them before he nodded. Yeah, of course. As we stepped back inside, the warmth of the party enveloped us once more, but something inside me had changed. I felt awake in a way I hadn't in years. For the rest of the night, I tried to shake it off, to push aside the feeling that David had somehow unraveled a thread I wasn't ready to pull. But no matter how many times I smiled, refilled drinks, and played the role of the perfect hostess, I felt his question coiling inside me. Who balances you? The party started winding down around midnight. A few guests had already left, while others lingered, reluctant to let the night end. Mark was still high-spirited, laughing and reminiscing with his friends, but I was beginning to feel the weight of the evening. It wasn't exhaustion, not exactly. It was more like an awareness that something inside me had shifted, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. David had kept his distance after our conversation on the patio, but I could still feel his presence in the room. Every now and then, I'd catch him watching me, his expression unreadable, as if he were waiting to see what I would do with the thoughts he had stirred. Eventually, most of the guests said their goodbyes, and the house quieted. Mark, a little tipsy, had gone upstairs to bed, leaving me alone to tidy up the last of the dishes. I didn't mind. I needed a few moments to myself. I had just finished stacking the last plate in the dishwasher when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find David standing in the kitchen doorway, his hands tucked into his pockets. "You didn't have to stay and help," I said, forcing a small smile. He shrugged. "Didn't feel right leaving without saying goodnight." I wiped my hands on a dish towel, suddenly feeling a strange nervous energy between us. The party was over. The distractions were gone, and now it was just the two of us, standing in the dim light of my kitchen, surrounded by the echoes of a conversation that had never really ended. David leaned against the counter, studying me for a long moment before speaking. "I hope I didn't overstep earlier." I shook my head. "No, you didn't." He exhaled, his gaze thoughtful. "Good, because I meant what I said. Claire, you deserve to be seen for who you are, not just as Mark's wife, not just as a hostess or a caretaker, but as you." His words hit deeper than I was willing to admit. How long had it been since someone had looked at me like that? Not as a role, not as a responsibility, but as a person. I swallowed, suddenly feeling vulnerable in a way I hadn't expected. "David, why are you saying all of this now?" His lips curved into a small, almost sad smile. "Because sometimes it takes seeing someone again, and after years apart, to realize what you've been missing." The air between us felt charged, but with what I wasn't sure, tension, understanding, an unspoken truth that neither of us was sure how to name. I'd glanced toward the stairs, half expecting to hear movement, but the house was silent. Mark was asleep. The world outside this moment didn't exist. David took a slow step closer. "Claire, I don't want to cross a line, but if I leave here tonight without saying this, I think I'd regret it." I held my breath, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear, saying what he hesitated for only a second before speaking: that you're not invisible, that you matter, and that if you ever wanted more, if you ever wanted something different, you deserve to know it's possible. The room felt impossibly still. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads I hadn't even realized existed, and I had no idea which path I was supposed to take. The silence between us stretched heavy with unspoken words. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, could feel the weight of the moment pressing against my chest. David's eyes never wavered from mine, steady, patient, waiting, not for an answer, not for an apology, just for me to acknowledge what had been hanging between us all night. I inhaled slowly, studying myself. "David, this is complicated." His lips twitched, almost amused. Life usually is. I let out a soft, breathy laugh, more out of nerves than humor. "That's not helping." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not trying to make this hard or clear. I couldn't leave without saying what I needed to say. And I know you feel it too." I swallowed hard. Did I? Maybe. No. Yes. I didn't know. I turned away from him, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "David, I have spent my entire life making the right choices, being the person everyone expects me to be." I closed my eyes. My voice dropped into almost a whisper. "I don't know who I am outside of that." David was quiet for a long moment before stepping beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him without actually touching. Then, maybe it's time to find out. His words sent a shiver down my spine, not from fear, but from something deeper, something that had been buried for far too long. I turned to face him again, searching his face for answers. I wasn't sure I wanted, and if I don't, David held my gaze, his expression unreadable. Then, nothing changes, and you go on, pretending tonight never happened. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. If I walked away from this moment, if I let it slip through my fingers, then I would wake up tomorrow of the same woman. I had always been safe, predictable, invisible. I looked toward the stairs again, toward the life I had built, toward the man who had never once questioned if I was fulfilled. Mark was a good man. He wasn't cruel or neglectful. He just didn't see me the way David did. Or maybe over the years, I had stopped wanting to be seen. David's voice was gentle when he spoke again. You don't have to decide tonight, Claire, but whatever you choose, make sure it's for you, not for Mark, not for me, just for you. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I nodded, barely able to speak. I thank you. David didn't push. He didn't reach for me or try to sway me. He simply nodded, understanding, passing between us. And then, with one last lingering glance, he turned and walked out the door. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring at the empty doorway, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. What had happened tonight wasn't betrayal. It wasn't scandalous or reckless. It was a realization, a choice, waiting to be made. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever I decided next would change everything.